In the heart of Lagos, the bustling energy of Nigeria's largest city echoed through the crowded streets. The traffic, the noise, the smells of jollof rice from street vendors, and the vibrant chatter of the people were all part of the daily rhythm of life. Yet for Adeze, a young woman in her late 20s, life had become a bit more silent and somber in recent months. The walls of her apartment, once filled with the sounds of joy, now stood still as she grappled with the reality of her broken engagement. It had been 2 months since she found out that her fiancé, Chidi, had been cheating on her with one of his co-workers. The revelation had devastated her. Chidi was the man she thought she would spend the rest of her life with. They had been together for over 3 years, and everything seemed perfect until the lies began to unravel. It started with a phone call. A message from a stranger, one of Chidi's colleagues, had come through, revealing that he had been unfaithful. The woman who called herself Chinonso confessed to Adaeze that she had been having an affair with Chidi for the past 6 months. The betrayal was painful enough, but it was what came next that changed Adaeze's life forever. The more Adaeze dug into the truth, the more secrets came to light. Chidi's affair wasn't just an isolated incident. Adaeze began to notice patterns that felt all too familiar. Infidelity had been woven into the fabric of her family's history, but Adaeze hadn't realized it until now. The lies that had been passed down through the generation had never been spoken aloud until now. As Adaeze sat on the couch in her small Lagos apartment, the weight of her thoughts grew heavier. Her mind wandered back to the time when she had confided in her mother Nkechi about the troubles in her relationship with Chidi. Her mother had told her in the sweetest tone to forgive and move on, but the words had never sat well with Adaeze. There was a deeper, unspoken truth buried within her mother's words, one that now seemed to haunt her every thought. Her mother's advice, it seemed, came from a place of experience, not a place of wisdom. Adaeze stood up from the couch and moved toward the bookshelf. She scanned the shelves of dusty books, photographs, and mementos from her past. It was then that she spotted the old family album. It was leather-bound, worn with age, but it was filled with the stories of her ancestors, her parents, grandparents, and even great-grandparents. As Adaeze opened the album, her fingers brushed over the faded pictures of a time long past. She flipped through the pages, and as she did, the images told stories she had never heard before. She paused when she reached a picture of her maternal grandmother, Nena, standing next to a man with a warm smile. It was a wedding photo from decades ago, but there was something off about the picture. The man in the photo didn't look like her grandfather, whom she knew had died years ago. Adaeze had heard stories about her grandmother's beauty, her strength, and her capacity for love, but never had she heard about this man. Curiosity bubbled within her. She had to know more. She called her mother, who answered the phone after a few rings. "Adaeze, my darling, I was just thinking about you. How are you?" "I'm fine, Mama. I need to ask you something," Adaeze said, her voice trembling slightly. "Who is the man in this photo with Nena?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Adaeze could feel her mother's hesitation. "That was Nena's first husband," Nkechi said quietly. "His name was Chijioke, but he wasn't your grandfather." "But why didn't you ever tell me about him?" Adaeze asked, the confusion in her voice growing stronger. Her mother sighed deeply. "Some things are better left forgotten, my dear. Trust me when I say that there are things about our family's past that are best left in the past." But Adaeze wasn't satisfied. She could feel the weight of the secret pressing against her chest. There was more to this story, and she needed to know it. The following weekend, Adaeze traveled to her family home in the suburbs of Lagos to visit her mother. The house, though modest, was warm and filled with memories. Her mother had always been a strong woman, resilient and independent, but there had always been a sadness in her eyes that Adaeze had never fully understood. As they sat down to eat together, Adaeze couldn't help but bring up the photo again. Her mother, who had been busy with her cooking, paused when she noticed the seriousness in Adaeze's eyes. Mama, I need to know about Nena and Chijoke, Adaeze insisted. I need to know what happened between them. Nkechi set down her spoon, and for the first time, Adaeze saw a flicker of fear in her mother's eyes. Chijoke was not a good man, Nkechi began, her voice soft, almost as though she were reliving the past. He was charming, yes, but he had a temper, and he was unfaithful. She paused. Your grandmother was a woman of great strength, but Chijuke's infidelity broke her heart. Wait, Adaeze interrupted. You mean Grandma had to deal with the same thing I'm going through? She was cheated on. Yes, her mother said softly. It wasn't just once, Adaeze. Chijuke had many affairs. He was a serial cheater, and Nena tried to forgive him, just as I told you to forgive Chidi. Adaeze's mind was spinning. And what happened? Nkechi's voice grew distant as she recalled the painful past. Your grandmother stayed in the marriage for the sake of the family, but she eventually realized that she could never truly forgive him. She left him, but it was too late. He died soon after, leaving her with the shame of it all. Adaeze sat back in her chair, stunned. The realization hit her like a wave. The pattern was not just with her and Chidi. It had been part of her family for generations. Her grandmother had been betrayed. Her mother had suffered through it in silence. And now Adaeze had become the latest victim in a long line of heartbreak. Is that why you stayed with Dad? Adaeze asked, her voice small. Because of what happened to Nena. Her mother didn't answer right away, but Adaeze could see the hurt in her eyes. Yes, Nkechi finally admitted, your father was unfaithful to me too, Adaeze, but I stayed because I thought I could fix things. I wanted to be strong for you. I didn't want you to grow up without a father, so I swallowed my pride and forgave him, but it broke me. Adaeze felt a rush of anger and sadness. So you've been living a lie this whole time. Not a lie, darling, Nkechi responded, her voice trembling. A compromise, a sacrifice for the family. But Adaeze wasn't sure if she could accept this truth. She felt betrayed not just by Chidi, but by her own family's legacy of infidelity. The realization was overwhelming. The pattern that had haunted the women in her family for generations was now repeating itself with her. Over the following weeks, Adaeze struggled with the weight of her family's past. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was bound by some invisible chain, one that tied her to the heartbreak and betrayal that had been passed down through the generations. She had always believed in love, in the purity of commitment, but now those beliefs felt like lies. She questioned her worth, her ability to trust, and the possibility of ever finding true love. She stopped speaking to Chidi. His apologies, his endless explanation did nothing to heal the wound he had caused. She needed time to think, to process what had happened, but most of all, she needed to break free from the cycle of infidelity that seemed to define her family's history. Adaeze made a decision. She would no longer stay silent about the pain. She would no longer let the fear of being alone keep her trapped in a relationship that was built on lies. She confronted her mother one last time. Mama, I can't do this anymore. I refuse to be a part of this cycle. I won't stay with someone who doesn't respect me. Her mother's eyes softened. I understand. Adies. I wish I had been brave enough to make that choice years ago. A year later, Adies had healed. She had moved to Abuja, started a new job, and began to rediscover herself. She realized that she was not defined by the mistakes of the men in her life or by the choices her mother and grandmother had made. She was stronger than that. She had broken the cycle. In Abuja, She met a man who treated her with kindness and respect, someone who shared her values of love and loyalty. But Adaise never forgot the lesson her family had taught her. She vowed to never settle for anything less than the truth and the love she deserved. She kept her grandmother's wedding picture on her mantle as a reminder of her family's history, but also as a reminder of her own strength. She had broken free, and in doing so, she had rewritten the story of her life. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Ades. The hustle of Lagos felt like a distant memory now that she was in Abuja, where the air was fresh and untainted by the noise and commotion of the big city. Ades had intentionally left the busy streets of Lagos behind, hoping to gain some clarity and distance from everything that had hurt her. She had poured herself into her work at a thriving marketing firm, slowly regaining her confidence as she focused on her career and new opportunities. Still, nights were often quiet. Alone in her apartment, Adaez would sit on her couch and replay the past, the affair with Chidi, her mother's secret, her grandmother's heartbreak. But instead of spiraling into despair as she once had, she began to see something else. Strength. She wasn't the broken woman she had feared she would become. Instead, she had found herself again. She had broken the chain, even if only for herself. But deep down, Adaise knew that the healing wasn't complete. Her grandmother, Nyena's story of infidelity, and her mother, Nkechi's sacrifices, had been etched into her heart. The women of her family had suffered in silence for so long, and now Adaise had to decide whether to be the woman who carried the weight of those lies or to rewrite her own story. Adaise began therapy to help walk through her emotional scars. In each session, she uncovered the deep roots of generational pain and began unpacking her family's history of infidelity. The therapist, a kind and patient woman named Dr. Oluwaseun, encouraged Ades to confront the patterns she had inherited. "You've already taken the first step," Dr. Oluwaseun said during one of their sessions. "You've recognized the cycle and you've made the decision to break it. Now, let's look at the next step, how to create a new legacy, one of love and respect." The idea of creating a legacy free from the pain and lies of the past, resonated deeply with Adaise. For too long, her family's history had shaped her present. It was time for her to take charge of her future. But how could she do that when the memories of betrayal still haunted her? One evening, while out for a walk in the quiet neighborhood of Abuja, Adaise thought about her grandmother, Nena. Nena had been a beautiful woman, strong-willed and independent. She had sacrificed everything for a man who did not deserve her. She had carried the weight of that pain for years before finally breaking free. But what if Nena had had the chance to heal? What if she had taken the time to love herself instead of waiting for the man who broke her heart? Ades wondered if she had been following in the same footsteps, stuck in a relationship that didn't serve her, that didn't value her. She sat on a bench in the park, watching the cars pass by. The evening air was warm, and the sound of distant laughter filled the space. It was peaceful, different from the chaotic energy of Lagos. "I deserve better," Adaise whispered to herself. "I don't have to repeat the past." Adaise's journey of self-discovery led her to re-examine the relationship she had. Her decision to end things with Chidi was final, but it wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. She realized she had to cultivate a sense of self-worth beyond the validation of her past relationship and start over in a way that was true to who she was. She began to spend more time with friends who uplifted her, people who respected her independence and understood her struggles. Her work began to flourish as well. She was promoted to a senior position at the firm, leading a team that focused on marketing strategies for local brands. Adaise had always been good at what she did, but now she found herself thriving in a way she hadn't before. The woman who had once been torn by betrayal was now standing tall, unapologetically confident in her ability to lead. And yet, Adaise still couldn't shake off the echoes of her family's legacy. The stories of women who had stayed in loveless marriages, women who had silently suffered for the sake of their children and families. Adaeze could see the pattern that ran through her family like a thread, but now she had the chance to change it and she wasn't going to waste it. Her relationship with her mother had become strained over the past few months. Nkechi had called several times, trying to convince Adaeze to reconcile with Chidi, to forgive him for the sake of love, but Adaeze had refused. She couldn't accept a love that wasn't genuine, a love built on lies. She couldn't go back to the woman who had sacrificed everything for a man who had no respect for her. Mama, Adaeze finally said during a phone conversation one evening, her voice steady. I understand why you stayed with Dad, but I won't live like that. I won't let my happiness be determined by someone else's actions. I need you to understand that. Nkechi's voice on the other end of the line faltered. I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did, Adaeze. You think you're strong now, but love is complicated. You'll see that one day. Love is about sacrifice. No, Mama, Adaeze replied softly, but firmly. Love is about respect. It's about being valued, not just tolerated. There was a long silence before Nkechi spoke again. I just want you to be happy, my daughter. And I want you to know that forgiveness is not always about the other person. It's about you. Adaise's heart ached as she thought about her mother's words. She had always believed in love, but now she knew that love didn't mean turning a blind eye to betrayal. It meant standing up for yourself, even when it meant breaking away from the people you loved. Months passed, and Adaise found herself moving forward with her life. She met new people, formed new connection, but she wasn't ready for another relationship. She needed time to focus on herself, on rebuilding her sense of trust, not just in others, but in herself. She had given so much of herself to others, but now it was time to pour that love back into her own life. Her healing wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others. The memories of Chidi's betrayal still stung, but with every tear that fell, Adaeze grew stronger. She began attending therapy regularly, not just to work through her family's generational trauma, but to also rediscover what made her happy. She reconnected with her love for painting and started exploring her creativity again, using it as a way to express the emotions she had buried for so long. One evening, after a particularly tough therapy session, Adaeze sat in front of a canvas, her paintbrush in hand. She painted the image of a woman standing on a cliff, looking out over a vast open horizon. The woman's posture was strong, her head held high. The sun was setting in the background, casting a golden glow over the scene. For the first time in a long while, Adaeze felt at peace. She was no longer the woman defined by betrayal and hurt. She was becoming the woman who could stand on her own, without the shadows of her past holding her back. The journey of healing was long, but Adaeze knew one thing for sure. She was the one who would rewrite her own story. A year later, Adaeze had become someone entirely new. She had risen from the ashes of her broken relationship, leaving behind the pain of her past. And although she had met someone new, someone who treated her with kindness and respect, Adaeze knew that her worth was no longer tied to the approval or validation of a man. She had learned to love herself, to trust herself, and to honor her own needs. And for the first time in her life, Adaeze was able to look in the mirror and see the woman who was worthy of love, not because of the relationship she had been in, but because of the strength she had found within herself. As she stood in front of the mirror, getting ready for her night out, Adaeze smiled. She had come a long way. And now, with her heart open to the possibilities of the future, she was ready to create her own legacy, one where love, respect, and trust were the foundation. And as for her family's legacy, Adaeze had broken the cycle. She was no longer a victim of betrayal, and she was determined that the women in her family, past and future, would carry forward a new story, one of love, honor, and strength. As the months wore on, Adeyeze's transformation continued. She found herself waking up every day with a renewed sense of purpose, a strength that had been buried deep within her all along. The pain of Chidi's betrayal had become a memory, one that no longer controlled her thoughts. Instead of focusing on what she had lost, Adaeze chose to focus on what she had gained: freedom, self-respect, and the courage to move forward. Her work was thriving, her social life was filled with friends who loved and supported her, and her creative side, once stifled, was now blossoming. Adaeze had taken up painting again, pouring her heart into each stroke. Her apartment, once a place of solitude and sadness, had been transformed into a sanctuary, a space filled with color, light, and life. But despite all the progress, there was still one unresolved part of her journey: her mother. Nkechi had been a constant presence in Adeyeze's life, but their relationship had become strained. Idiezi couldn't shake the feeling that her mother's unspoken experiences had shaped her own view of love and relationships. Although Idiezi had forgiven her mother for the silence that had surrounded the infidelity in their family, she still felt a need for closure, a deeper understanding of her mother's choices. Nkechi continued to reach out to her daughter, calling every week, checking in, offering advice that Adaeze had long ago stopped listening to. But this time, Adaeze was ready. She was ready to have the conversation that had been long overdue. One Sunday afternoon, after finishing a long day at work, Adaeze called her mother and asked her to meet for coffee. When they sat down at a small cafe in the city, Adaeze could sense the tension between them. The conversation felt heavy, as if both women were holding something back. "Mama, I've been thinking about our family," Adaeze began, her voice calm but firm, "and about Nena, and what happened between her and Chijoke." Nkechi looked down at her coffee cup, her hand trembling slightly. "You know, Adaeze, I never wanted you to carry that burden. I didn't want you to see me as weak because of what I chose to do." "Mama," Adaeze said softly, "I don't see you as weak, but I need to understand why you stayed with Dad. I need to know why you allowed me to grow up thinking everything was perfect when you were hurting all along." Nkechi sighed deeply, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was not easy. Staying with your father was not easy, but I thought it was what was best for you, for the family. I sacrificed my happiness because I didn't want you to grow up without your father. I wanted to keep the family intact, to protect you. But, Mama, at what cost?" Adaise's voice grew more urgent. "At what cost did your sacrifice come? You were broken inside and I saw it. I saw you put yourself second every day, and I didn't understand it back then, but I do now. It hurt me, Mama. It hurt me to see you hurt and to know that you thought it was okay to keep living like that." There was a long pause, and Kechi wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I never wanted you to feel that way, my daughter. I thought I was doing what was right, but I see now that I should have been honest with you. I should have been honest with myself too." Adaeze reached across the table, placing her hand over her mother's. "Mama, you don't have to carry that burden anymore. You taught me what it meant to love deeply, but you also taught me what it means to settle for less than I deserve. I'm breaking that cycle, Mama. I'm breaking it for myself, and I'm breaking it for you too." Nkechi's face softened as she gazed at her daughter, the weight of years of secrets lifting slightly. "I am proud of you, Adeyes. I see now that you are stronger than I ever was, and I see that you are capable of finding the love you deserve, the love that is true and pure. I should have shown you that sooner, but I am glad that you have found it for yourself." Adizi smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm doing it for me, Mama. For the first time, I'm doing it for me." Several months later, Adaeze found herself in a place she had never thought she would be, ready to trust again. But this time, it wasn't out of desperation or loneliness. It was because she had learned to trust herself first. She had met someone new, Emeka. He was kind, respectful, and patient. They had met at a work event where Adaeze had been presenting a new marketing campaign. Emeka, a fellow marketing professional, had approached her afterward to compliment her on the presentation. What began as a casual conversation soon blossomed into a friendship based on mutual respect and shared values. Over time, their connection deepened, and Hadiezi realized that she was falling for him. For the first time in a long while, Hadiezi felt safe. She could be herself around Emeka. No pretenses, no games. He loved her for who she was, scars and all. And in return, Adaeze loved him for the way he saw her, not as a woman broken by the mistakes of others, but as a woman capable of great love and strength. One evening, after months of deep conversation, laughter, and shared moments, Emeka took Adaeze to a small quiet restaurant by the water. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue across the sky, and the atmosphere felt magical. "Adaeze," Emeka began, his voice gentle yet full of emotion. "I've come to admire you more than words can express. You are strong, kind, and beautiful, and I feel blessed to have you in my life. I don't want to rush anything, but I know that I want you by my side, now and always." Adaeze's heart fluttered in her chest as she looked into his eyes. She had never felt this kind of peace, this kind of certainty. She reached out and took his hand, his smile spreading across her face. "I've been through so much," Adaeze said, her voice steady. "But I've learned that love is not about fixing someone else, it's about growing together. I'm ready, Emeka, I'm ready to build a future with you." And so, they began. Adaeze's journey had been long and filled with heartache, but now she was walking forward with someone who truly saw her for who she was, flaws and all. They both knew that their relationship wasn't about perfection. It was about respect, understanding, and love. Adaeze's family legacy of pain and betrayal had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. She had rewritten her story. As Adaeze looked out at the horizon from her apartment, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The sun had set, and the city was alive with its usual hum. But for the first time in a long while, Adaeze felt like she was in control of her own future. She had learned to forgive herself and those who had wronged her. She had learned that love was not about sacrificing her happiness for the sake of others, but about nurturing it, sharing it, and allowing herself to grow. She had become the woman who had broken free from the chains of her family's history. Adaeze was no longer the victim of betrayal. She was the creator of her own legacy, a legacy that would carry forward the lessons of strength, resilience, and the importance of love built on trust and respect. And as she moved forward into the future, Adaeze knew that no matter what came her way, she was ready to face it, armed with the knowledge that she was enough just as she was.